Introduction. Why most people feel mentally weak. Most people are not physically weak. They are mentally exhausted. Their minds are constantly overloaded with fear, stress, distraction, anxiety, emotional chaos, and endless overthinking. Every day they wake up already mentally tired, emotionally reactive, and psychologically overwhelmed without fully understanding why. Modern life has created an environment where the human mind rarely gets rest. Notifications constantly demand attention. Social media creates comparison and insecurity. Fear-based information floods the brain daily. People are surrounded by pressure, uncertainty, distraction, and emotional overstimulation. Over time, negative thinking becomes automatic. Fear begins controlling decisions. Overthinking destroys confidence. Emotional reactions weaken judgment. And slowly, people lose control of their own minds. The hidden cost of this mental weakness is enormous. Dreams remain unfinished. Opportunities are avoided. Confidence disappears. Stress becomes normal. Many people spend years trapped inside fear without realizing their mindset is shaping their entire reality. But mentally strong people think differently. They understand that emotional control creates power. They train themselves to stay calm under pressure, act despite fear, and think long-term instead of emotionally. They understand that mental strength is not something people are born with. It is something built through awareness, discipline, and repeated action. Awareness is always the first step toward transformation. And throughout this book, you will learn how to rewire your mindset, control your emotions, overcome fear, and build the kind of mental strength that changes every area of your life. Chapter 1. Your mind becomes what you repeatedly think. The human mind is constantly shaping itself. Every thought you repeat, every belief you reinforce, every emotion you entertain repeatedly becomes part of your psychological identity over time. Most people underestimate how powerful this process truly is. They believe thoughts are temporary mental events that disappear quickly, but repeated thinking slowly rewires the brain, shapes behavior, influences emotions, and eventually determines the direction of an entire life. Your mind becomes what you repeatedly think about. This is one of the most important psychological truths a person can understand. Most people are not trapped by external limitations as much as they are trapped by internal thought patterns. They repeat fear daily. They rehearse insecurity constantly. They imagine failure repeatedly. They overanalyze problems obsessively. And because the brain adapts to repetition, these patterns eventually become automatic. Thoughts create identity. The brain is constantly listening to internal dialogue. Whether you realize it or not, the way you speak to yourself influences confidence, emotional stability, motivation, resilience, and behavior. If someone repeatedly tells themselves they are weak, incapable, unattractive, unlucky, or not good enough, the brain slowly begins accepting those statements as reality. Self-talk becomes self-programming. Most people speak to themselves more harshly than they would ever speak to another human being. They criticize themselves constantly after mistakes. They focus on flaws more than strengths. They replay embarrassing moments repeatedly. They predict failure before action even begins. Over time, negative thinking becomes psychologically automatic. This happens because the brain prioritizes repetition over truth. Whatever thoughts are repeated most frequently become stronger neural pathways. The mind learns through reinforcement. If fear-based thinking happens daily, the brain becomes trained to fear automatically. If self-doubt repeats constantly, insecurity becomes familiar psychologically. The brain adapts to repeated mental patterns. This is why negative thinking can become addictive without people realizing it. The mind becomes comfortable with familiar emotional states, even destructive ones. Some people become so accustomed to anxiety, stress, overthinking, pessimism, or self-criticism that these states begin feeling normal. But normal does not mean healthy. The human brain also has a natural negativity bias. Throughout evolution, survival depended more on noticing danger than appreciating positivity. Ancient humans who ignored threats often did not survive long. Because of this, the brain evolved to focus heavily on problems, risks, uncertainty, criticism, and potential danger. This survival wiring still exists today. Modern humans no longer face predators in the wilderness daily, but the brain still scans constantly for emotional threats. Rejection feels dangerous. Criticism feels dangerous. Failure feels dangerous. Uncertainty feels dangerous. The mind automatically searches for problems because psychologically it believes this increases safety. This is why overthinking happens so naturally. The brain believes worrying creates control. It assumes that if problems are analyzed repeatedly, pain can somehow be avoided. But instead of creating peace, excessive negative thinking usually creates emotional exhaustion. People become trapped inside mental loops. They replay conversations repeatedly. They imagine worst-case scenarios constantly. They anticipate rejection before it happens. They predict failure before taking action. The mind becomes consumed by fear-based thinking patterns. Over time, this affects behavior directly. Someone constantly thinking negatively begins acting differently. They avoid opportunities because they expect failure. They stay silent because they fear judgment. They procrastinate because anxiety overwhelms action. Thoughts influence decisions, and decisions shape life outcomes. This is how mindset silently shapes reality. A fearful mind creates fearful behavior. An insecure mind creates self-sabotage. A disciplined mind creates consistency. A confident mind creates action. The external life often reflects internal thinking patterns more than people realize. Beliefs are especially powerful because beliefs shape perception itself. The brain constantly filters reality according to what it already expects to see. Someone believing the world is dangerous notices danger everywhere. Someone believing they are incapable notices evidence supporting insecurity constantly. People rarely see reality objectively. They see reality through belief systems. This is why two people can experience the same situation but interpret it completely differently. One person sees rejection as proof of worthlessness. Another sees it as normal feedback. One person sees failure as personal destruction. Another sees it as learning. The event matters less than the interpretation. Psychology research repeatedly shows that beliefs influence emotional experience, performance, resilience, and even physical behavior. Someone believing they can improve usually persists longer during difficulty. Someone believing change is impossible often quits before growth even begins. Belief changes action. Action changes outcomes. Outcomes reinforce belief. This creates powerful psychological cycles. Negative beliefs create negative behaviors, which create negative results, which strengthen negative beliefs further. But positive, growth-oriented beliefs can create the opposite cycle. Courage creates action. Action creates experience. Experience builds confidence. Confidence strengthens identity. The brain is always adapting. This adaptability is called neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to rewire itself through repeated experiences and thoughts. Every repeated thought strengthens certain neural pathways while weakening others. The mind literally changes structurally based on repeated thinking patterns. This means no mindset is permanently fixed. Fear can be weakened, confidence can be strengthened, calmness can be trained, discipline can be built. But repetition is required. Most people want transformation without repetition. They want confidence instantly without practicing courage. They want calmness without learning emotional regulation. They want positive thinking while continuing negative self-talk daily. The brain does not change through occasional effort. It changes through consistent repetition. This is why mentally strong people become intentional about their internal dialogue. They understand thoughts influence emotional state, behavior, and identity. They stop feeding destructive mental patterns constantly. Instead of repeating, "I can't do this," they begin practicing, "I can learn this." Instead of, "I always fail," they begin focusing on, "What can I improve?" This is not fake positivity or delusion. Mentally strong people do not ignore problems. They simply stop strengthening destructive thought patterns unnecessarily. The goal is not perfect thinking. The goal is useful thinking. Thoughts should strengthen action, clarity, and resilience, not weaken them. Replacing destructive thinking patterns requires awareness first. Most people think automatically all day without observing their mental habits. They assume every thought deserves belief, but awareness creates separation. You are not every thought you think. This realization changes everything psychologically. A fearful thought does not automatically mean danger exists. An insecure thought does not automatically define reality. An anxious thought does not automatically predict the future. Thoughts are mental events, not absolute truth. Mentally strong individuals learn to observe thoughts instead of instantly obeying them. They question destructive beliefs. They challenge negative assumptions. They interrupt repetitive fear-based thinking patterns before those patterns gain more strength. This creates mental freedom. One of the most effective ways to change thought patterns is through repeated behavioral evidence. Action weakens limiting beliefs faster than thinking alone. Someone believing they are socially awkward gains confidence by practicing social interaction repeatedly. Someone believing they are weak develops strength through disciplined behavior consistently. Experience rewires belief. This is why courageous action matters psychologically. The brain learns more from evidence than theory. Repeatedly facing fears teaches the nervous system new emotional associations. Confidence grows through lived experience, not motivational thinking alone. Environment also shapes thought patterns heavily. Negative environments reinforce negative thinking. Fearful people strengthen fear. Constant comparison creates insecurity. Endless digital stimulation weakens focus and emotional stability. This is why protecting mental input matters. The books you read, the people around you, the content you consume, and the conversations you tolerate all influence internal dialogue gradually. Repeated exposure becomes mental conditioning. Strong minds are built intentionally. Eventually, repeated healthy thinking creates emotional transformation. Someone who practices disciplined thinking daily becomes calmer automatically. Someone who repeatedly focuses on growth becomes more resilient naturally. Someone who trains empowering internal dialogue develops stronger self-trust gradually. This process compounds over time. A single thought may seem insignificant, but repeated thoughts become beliefs. Beliefs become behavior. Behavior becomes identity. And identity shapes destiny. This is why controlling your thoughts is not just a motivational idea. It is psychological training. Every moment of awareness becomes an opportunity to strengthen the kind of mind you want to build. Because eventually, the thoughts you repeat most often stop feeling like thoughts at all. They become the person you believe yourself to be. Chapter 2. Fear exists to control. Fear is one of the most powerful forces controlling human behavior. Most people believe fear is simply an emotion that appears during dangerous situations, but fear is much deeper than that. It silently shapes decisions, controls behavior, influences identity, limits potential, and determines how people live their lives. Entire lives are built around avoiding fear without people even realizing it. Many dreams are abandoned because of fear. Many opportunities are ignored because of fear. Many people stay trapped in unhealthy environments, toxic relationships, and emotionally exhausting routines simply because fear feels stronger than uncertainty. The truth is that fear was never designed to make you happy. It was designed to keep you alive. The human brain evolved for survival, not fulfillment. Thousands of years ago, survival depended on detecting danger quickly. Humans who reacted fast to threats had a better chance of staying alive. Because of this, the brain developed powerful fear systems designed to protect against uncertainty, risk, and possible harm. Deep inside the brain exists a small structure called the amygdala, which acts like an internal alarm system. Its job is to detect danger and trigger immediate survival responses. When ancient humans faced predators or physical threats, this system became essential for survival. The body would instantly release stress hormones, increase heart rate, sharpen awareness, and prepare for action. This became known as the fight, flight, or freeze response. The problem is that modern life changed faster than the human brain evolved. Most people are no longer running from predators or physical danger daily, but the brain still reacts to emotional discomfort as if survival is being threatened. Rejection feels dangerous. Criticism feels dangerous. Embarrassment feels dangerous. Failure feels dangerous. Public speaking, uncertainty, judgment, and social disapproval all trigger ancient survival wiring even when no real physical danger exists. This is why fear feels so powerful and automatic. The brain treats uncertainty like a threat because uncertainty historically meant danger. Not knowing what might happen created vulnerability. As a result, the human mind constantly seeks predictability, control, and emotional safety. This explains why people often stay in situations that make them unhappy simply because those situations feel familiar. Familiar pain feels safer to the brain than unfamiliar growth. Fear thrives inside uncertainty. The mind constantly asks questions like, what if I fail? What if people judge me? What if I embarrass myself? What if things go wrong? These thoughts create emotional paralysis because the brain is trying to avoid possible pain. Most people think fear means they should stop moving forward, but fear is usually strongest precisely when growth is possible. The brain interprets unfamiliar experiences as threats, even when those experiences could improve life dramatically. This is why people fear success almost as much as failure. Failure threatens identity and security, but success creates uncertainty too. Success requires change. It creates responsibility, visibility, pressure, and new expectations. Many people unconsciously sabotage opportunities because growth feels emotionally uncomfortable. The brain would rather remain predictable than uncertain. Fear also controls people through social survival instincts. Human beings evolved in tribes where belonging was necessary for survival. Rejection from the group once meant possible death. Because of this, the brain developed an intense sensitivity towards social judgment, criticism, and exclusion. Even today, many people organize their entire lives around avoiding rejection. They hide their true opinions. They stay silent during opportunities. They avoid taking risks. They seek constant approval. They become addicted to validation. The fear of judgment becomes stronger than the desire for growth. Social media has amplified this psychological problem dramatically. People constantly compare themselves to others while fearing criticism, embarrassment, or failure publicly. Every post, opinion, or action feels exposed to judgment. Over time, many people become psychologically trapped inside performance-based living, where they prioritize approval over authenticity. Fear creates emotional avoidance patterns. Avoidance is one of the brain's favorite survival strategies because avoiding discomfort provides temporary emotional relief. When people avoid difficult conversations, uncomfortable situations, public speaking challenges, or risks, anxiety decreases temporarily. The brain interprets this temporary relief as success and strengthens avoidance behavior further. but avoidance secretly strengthens fear. Every avoided situation teaches the brain that fear was correct. The mind begins believing that situation truly was dangerous. I really couldn't handle it. Avoidance kept me safe. This creates a vicious cycle. Fear creates avoidance. Avoidance strengthens fear. Stronger fear creates more avoidance. Eventually, people build entire lives around emotional safety instead of growth. This is how fear silently imprisons people. Many people never realize how much fear controls them because fear often disguises itself as logic. People say, "I'm waiting for the perfect time. I need to think more first. I'm just being realistic. I'm not ready yet." But underneath these excuses often exists fear of uncertainty, judgment, discomfort, or failure. Fear wants safety. Growth requires uncertainty. This is why mentally strong people think differently about fear. They understand that fear is not always a warning sign to stop. Sometimes fear is simply evidence that growth is happening. Courageous people are not fearless. They simply stop treating fear like a command. Courage means moving despite fear. This changes everything psychologically. Most people wait to feel confident before acting, but confidence rarely appears before action. Confidence is usually built after repeated exposure to discomfort. The nervous system learns through experience. Every time someone faces fear without collapsing emotionally, the brain slowly updates its understanding of danger. This is how courage is trained. A person terrified of public speaking becomes calmer through repeated speaking experiences. Someone afraid of rejection becomes emotionally stronger through repeated social exposure. Someone fearful of failure builds resilience through repeated attempts. Action rewires fear. The brain learns safety through evidence, not overthinking. Thinking about fear rarely removes fear. In many cases, excessive thinking strengthens it because the mind continuously imagines danger. This creates mental loops where people rehearse worst-case scenarios repeatedly without taking action. Fear grows in stillness. Courage grows in movement. This is why small, courageous actions matter so much psychologically. Tiny acts of bravery begin retraining the nervous system gradually. Speaking up once, taking one risk, having one uncomfortable conversation, facing one avoided challenge. These moments slowly weaken fear's control over identity. The brain begins learning, "I survived. I can handle discomfort. Fear did not destroy me." Over time, self-trust grows. Self-trust is one of the most powerful psychological weapons against fear. Fear becomes weaker when you repeatedly prove to yourself that discomfort is survivable. The goal is not eliminating fear completely because fear is part of being human. The goal is building enough internal strength that fear no longer controls decisions. Mentally strong people understand this deeply. They know fear often appears before growth, opportunity, transformation, and success. Instead of running from discomfort automatically, they train themselves to remain calm inside uncertainty. They understand that the brain's first reaction is not always the best response. The primitive mind seeks safety. The disciplined mind seeks growth. This difference separates emotionally reactive people from mentally strong individuals. One obeys fear automatically. The other observes fear but chooses action intentionally. Training the mind to move despite fear requires repetition and emotional discipline. Every act of courage strengthens psychological resilience. Every difficult situation survived builds emotional confidence. Every moment of discomfort faced without avoidance creates greater freedom internally. Eventually, fear loses some of its power. Not because fear disappears completely, but because you become stronger than the fear itself. And that is where real mental transformation begins. Chapter 3. Overthinking is mental self-destruction. Overthinking is one of the most destructive mental habits in modern life, yet most people mistake it for intelligence. They believe that constantly analyzing every situation, replaying conversations, imagining future problems, and mentally preparing for every possible outcome somehow gives them control. But overthinking rarely creates clarity. More often, it creates fear, anxiety, confusion, emotional exhaustion, and paralysis. It drains confidence, weakens decision-making, and traps people inside their own minds. The greatest danger of overthinking is that it feels productive while secretly destroying mental strength from the inside. The human brain naturally obsesses over uncertainty because uncertainty represents potential danger psychologically. Throughout human evolution, survival depended on predicting threats before they happened. Ancient humans who anticipated danger had a better chance of staying alive. Because of this, the brain evolved to constantly scan for problems, risks, and possible negative outcomes. This survival mechanism still operates today, even though most modern dangers are emotional rather than physical. The brain treats uncertainty like an emergency. Not knowing whether someone likes you, whether you will succeed, whether you will fail, whether the future will work out, or whether people will judge you creates psychological discomfort. The mind responds by trying to eliminate uncertainty through excessive thinking. It believes that if it analyzes situations deeply enough, predicts enough outcomes, or prepares for enough scenarios, it can somehow avoid pain completely. But this is an illusion. Overthinking does not create certainty. It only creates mental noise. Most people trapped in overthinking are not actually solving problems. They are replaying fears repeatedly. They imagine conversations that never happen. They mentally rehearse failures that do not exist. They create catastrophic future scenarios inside their minds and emotionally react to those imaginary situations as if they are already real. This creates constant psychological stress. The body does not fully distinguish between real danger and vividly imagined danger. When someone repeatedly thinks fearful thoughts, stress hormones activate continuously. The nervous system remains tense. The mind becomes exhausted. Anxiety increases. Emotional resilience weakens. Eventually, people become mentally drained not because of reality itself, but because of the endless mental battles happening inside their own heads. This is why overthinking feels so heavy emotionally. The mind becomes trapped in loops. Someone replays one embarrassing moment repeatedly for days. Someone analyzes one text message for hours. Someone delays opportunities because they cannot stop imagining worst-case outcomes. Someone avoids action entirely because they fear making the wrong decision. This pattern is known as paralysis by analysis. The more people think, the harder action becomes. Every possible risk becomes magnified. Every uncertainty becomes emotionally overwhelming. The brain keeps searching for perfect certainty before movement, but perfect certainty never arrives. Life does not reward endless thinking. Life rewards intelligent action. Overthinkers often believe they are being careful or responsible, but in reality, they are usually trying to protect themselves emotionally from uncertainty, failure, rejection, or discomfort. Thinking becomes emotional avoidance disguised as preparation. This is why overthinking is deeply connected to fear. Fear says, "What if something goes wrong?" Overthinking responds, "Let me think about it endlessly so I can feel safe." But safety never comes. Instead, the mind creates even more imagined problems. One fearful thought triggers another, then another, then another. Eventually, the person becomes trapped inside an endless psychological maze where every possible outcome feels dangerous. Confidence begins disappearing. This happens because confidence is built through action and experience, not excessive thinking. Every time someone delays action because of overthinking, they unintentionally strengthen self-doubt. The brain learns, You avoided this because you couldn't handle it. This situation must truly be dangerous. You are not capable yet. Avoidance strengthens insecurity. Meanwhile, people who act despite uncertainty slowly build self-trust. They gain experience. They develop emotional resilience. They learn that mistakes are survivable. Overthinkers rarely gain this evidence because they remain mentally stuck before action even begins. The illusion of control through thinking is one of the biggest psychological traps humans experience. The brain believes thinking longer creates certainty, but most important decisions in life will always involve uncertainty. Relationships involve uncertainty. Business involves uncertainty. Growth involves uncertainty. Success involves uncertainty. There is no amount of thinking capable of removing all risk from life. Yet, overthinkers keep trying. They mentally search for guarantees that do not exist. This constant mental activity creates exhaustion because the brain was never designed to remain in non-stop analysis mode all day. Modern life already overloads the nervous system with information, stimulation, comparison, pressure, and distraction. Overthinking multiplies this overload internally. The mind never rests. Even during quiet moments, overthinkers remain psychologically busy. They replay the past. They fear the future. They analyze social interactions. They criticize themselves constantly. They question every decision repeatedly. Eventually, mental exhaustion becomes normal. Many people do not even realize how tired their minds truly are. The brain becomes addicted to thinking because thinking creates the temporary illusion of control. Even negative thinking can feel psychologically comforting because it feels familiar. The mind assumes, if I keep thinking about the problem, maybe I can prevent pain. But pain often increases precisely because of the thinking itself. This is why emotionally strong people develop a different relationship with thought. They understand that not every thought deserves attention. They recognize that the mind naturally generates fear, doubt, insecurity, and catastrophic scenarios automatically. Instead of blindly believing every thought, they observe thoughts more objectively. A thought is not automatically truth. This realization creates enormous psychological freedom. Just because the mind imagines failure does not mean failure will happen. Just because the mind predicts rejection does not mean rejection is guaranteed. Just because anxiety exists does not mean danger is real. The brain often exaggerates threats because survival wiring prioritizes caution. Mentally strong people learn to separate thinking from reality. This does not mean ignoring problems completely. Healthy thinking matters. Strategic planning matters. Reflection matters. But productive thinking leads toward clarity and action. Overthinking leads toward fear and paralysis. One creates movement. The other destroys momentum. Action is one of the most powerful cures for overthinking because action interrupts mental loops. The brain learns through experience far more effectively than through endless analysis. Someone afraid of failure gains confidence by attempting difficult things repeatedly. Someone anxious about social interaction becomes calmer by practicing social situations consistently. Movement creates evidence. Evidence weakens fear. This is why clarity often appears after action, not before it. Most people wait until they feel fully ready before taking action, but readiness is often created through movement itself. Confidence grows during the process. Understanding develops during experience. Emotional resilience strengthens during challenge. Action teaches the nervous system that uncertainty is survivable. This changes everything psychologically. Instead of constantly asking, "What if things go wrong?" Mentally strong people begin asking, "What happens if I never act at all?" That question reveals the real danger. The greatest destruction caused by overthinking is not temporary anxiety. It is lost potential. Opportunities disappear. Relationships never begin. Dreams remain unfinished. Talents stay hidden. Entire lives become smaller because fear-based thinking prevented movement. Many people spend years mentally preparing for lives they never actually live. Escaping overthinking requires emotional discipline and awareness. The first step is recognizing when thinking stops being useful and starts becoming destructive. Productive thinking solves problems. Destructive overthinking repeats fear. There is a difference. One powerful method for breaking mental loops is limiting decision time. Overthinkers often endlessly search for perfect decisions, but perfection rarely exists. Setting time limits forces action and reduces excessive mental analysis. Another powerful strategy is grounding attention in the present moment. Overthinking usually lives in imagined futures or replayed pasts. Bringing awareness back to immediate reality calms the nervous system significantly. Breathing slowly, moving physically, focusing on immediate tasks, reducing digital overstimulation, taking action before feeling ready. These behaviors interrupt psychological spirals. Most importantly, mentally strong people stop trying to eliminate uncertainty completely. They accept that uncertainty is part of life. Growth always involves unknown outcomes. Fearless people are not people without uncertainty. They are people who stop allowing uncertainty to control behavior. Overthinking weakens when action strengthens. Eventually, the mind becomes calmer not because life becomes perfectly predictable, but because self-trust becomes stronger. You begin realizing that you can handle discomfort, mistakes, uncertainty, and temporary failure without collapsing emotionally. And once that realization becomes real internally, the mind slowly stops fighting itself so much. That is when mental freedom truly begins. Chapter 4. Emotional Reactions. Give away your power. Most people believe emotional reactions are natural expressions of honesty and authenticity. They think exploding in anger, reacting impulsively, overreacting emotionally, or immediately expressing every feeling is proof of being real. But emotional impulsiveness rarely demonstrates strength. More often, it reveals a lack of self-control. The truth is that every uncontrolled emotional reaction gives away power. It places your emotions, decisions, and behavior under the control of external situations instead of internal discipline. The moment someone else can control your emotions easily, they begin controlling your mind. Emotionally reactive people live at the mercy of circumstances. Their mood changes based on what happens around them. One negative comment ruins their confidence. One stressful situation destroys their peace. One disagreement controls their behavior. Their emotional state constantly shifts because they react automatically instead of responding intentionally. There is a major psychological difference between reacting and responding. Reacting is automatic. Responding is controlled. A reaction happens instantly without awareness. It is emotional, impulsive, and driven by survival instincts. A response, however, involves awareness, emotional regulation, and deliberate choice. Reactions come from emotional chaos. Responses come from psychological strength. Most people spend their lives reacting. Someone criticizes them, and they instantly become defensive. Someone disrespects them, and they immediately explode in anger. Something stressful happens, and anxiety takes over completely. They feel uncomfortable emotions, and impulsive decisions follow automatically. This pattern weakens mental strength over time because emotionally reactive people never develop control over themselves. They become slaves to temporary emotional states. The human brain naturally reacts emotionally because survival wiring prioritizes speed over wisdom. Deep inside the brain, the amygdala constantly scans for danger. When the brain detects threat, stress hormones flood the body immediately. Heart rate increases, muscles tighten, breathing changes. Rational thinking weakens temporarily, while emotional survival systems take control. This reaction once helped humans survive physical danger, but modern life triggers these same systems constantly through emotional stress instead of physical threats. Rejection, criticism, embarrassment, uncertainty, and conflict all activate the same survival responses. This is why emotional reactions feel so automatic. Anger, anxiety, frustration, fear, jealousy, and emotional impulsiveness are often survival responses happening faster than conscious awareness. The problem is that emotionally reactive behavior creates enormous long-term damage in modern life. One moment of anger can destroy years of trust. One impulsive decision can create lasting regret. One emotional outburst can damage opportunities permanently. Most people underestimate the hidden cost of emotional chaos. Anger especially creates powerful psychological blindness. When someone becomes angry, rational thinking weakens dramatically. The emotional brain begins controlling perception. People say things they later regret. They exaggerate problems. They become aggressive, defensive, irrational, or destructive. After the emotional intensity fades, regret often appears. This happens because emotional reactions are temporary, but consequences can become permanent. Anxiety creates similar problems psychologically. Fearful emotional states distort perception and decision-making. Someone overwhelmed by anxiety often assumes worst-case scenarios automatically. Small problems feel catastrophic. Uncertainty feels unbearable. The nervous system becomes hyper-alert constantly. Eventually, emotionally reactive people lose peace internally because their mind becomes unstable. Every situation controls them emotionally. External circumstances determine inner state. This is why calmness creates psychological power. Calm people think clearly while others panic emotionally. Calmness allows rational thinking to remain active during pressure, conflict, uncertainty, and stress. Emotionally disciplined individuals are harder to manipulate because they do not lose control easily. The calmer person usually has more power in any situation. This does not mean emotionally strong people never feel emotions. They absolutely do. They feel anger, fear, anxiety, frustration, disappointment, and emotional pain like everyone else. The difference is that they do not immediately obey those emotions. They create space between feeling and action. That space changes everything. Within that pause exists the ability to choose responses intentionally instead of reacting automatically. Most people never develop this ability because emotional reactions happen so quickly they feel unavoidable. But emotional control can absolutely be trained. The first step is awareness. Emotionally strong people learn to notice physical signs of emotional activation early. Tight muscles, faster breathing, racing thoughts, increased tension, elevated heart rate. These signals indicate emotional systems are taking over. Instead of instantly reacting, disciplined individuals pause. That pause weakens emotional impulsiveness significantly because it allows the rational brain to reconnect. Even a few seconds of awareness can prevent destructive emotional behavior. Strategic non-reaction is one of the most powerful psychological skills a person can develop. Most people think power comes from dominating arguments, proving points, or emotionally defending themselves constantly. In reality, emotional control often creates far greater influence than emotional intensity. Not every insult deserves a response. Not every criticism deserves emotional energy. Not every conflict deserves participation. Emotionally reactive people give away power by reacting to everything. Calm people conserve energy intentionally. Silence itself can become strength. Someone emotionally attacking you often expects emotional chaos in return. When calmness replaces reactivity, psychological control shifts dramatically. Strategic non-reaction confuses emotionally impulsive individuals because they cannot manipulate calm minds easily. This does not mean suppressing emotions completely. Emotional suppression is unhealthy because ignored emotions often return stronger later. Emotional mastery means acknowledging emotions without allowing them to control behavior automatically. There is a massive difference between feeling anger and becoming anger, between feeling anxiety and obeying anxiety, between experiencing emotion and surrendering to emotion. Emotionally strong people feel emotions fully while remaining psychologically grounded. Pressure reveals emotional maturity clearly. Anyone can appear calm during easy situations. Real emotional discipline appears during stress, conflict, uncertainty, and challenge. This is when reactive people lose control while disciplined individuals maintain composure. Composure is psychological strength under pressure. This ability transforms every area of life. Relationships improve because conflicts become calmer and more constructive. Decision-making improves because emotions stop controlling judgment completely. Confidence increases because self-trust strengthens internally. The greatest form of power is self-control. People who cannot control themselves are easily controlled by circumstances, stress, social pressure, fear, and manipulation. But emotionally disciplined individuals develop inner stability that external situations struggle to shake. This creates emotional freedom. Emotionally reactive people constantly seek control over external situations because they cannot control themselves internally. Calm people focus on controlling their own responses instead. This mindset changes life entirely. You cannot control every situation. You cannot control other people. You cannot control uncertainty completely. But you can control how you respond. That realization creates enormous psychological peace. One of the most powerful shifts happens when people stop asking, "How do I stop feeling emotions?" and begin asking, "How do I stop emotions from controlling my actions?" That question leads toward emotional mastery. Breathing techniques, mindfulness, awareness practices, physical exercise, disciplined routines, and intentional pauses all help strengthen emotional regulation over time. But ultimately, emotional strength grows through repeated practice under real conditions. Every difficult conversation handled calmly strengthens discipline. Every stressful situation survived without panic builds resilience. Every emotional trigger managed intentionally increases self-control. This process compounds gradually. Eventually, emotional reactions lose some of their power. Not because emotions disappear, but because awareness becomes stronger than impulsiveness. You begin realizing that emotions are temporary states, not permanent truths. This creates emotional stability that most people never develop. And once someone becomes emotionally stable, they become much harder to manipulate, intimidate, or control psychologically. That is what it means to become emotionally untouchable. Chapter 5. Comfort is quietly destroying your potential. The human brain is designed to seek comfort, safety, and familiarity above almost everything else. From an evolutionary perspective, this survival instinct once protected human beings from danger. Staying safe increased the chances of survival. Avoiding uncertainty reduced risk. Conserving energy protected the body during difficult conditions. Thousands of years ago, these instincts helped humans stay alive. But in modern life, the same survival wiring often becomes the greatest obstacle to growth, confidence, courage, and transformation. The brain still prioritizes emotional safety over long-term fulfillment, even when comfort is slowly destroying potential. Most people never realize how much of their life is controlled by comfort-seeking behavior. They believe they are making rational decisions, but often they are simply avoiding discomfort unconsciously. They stay inside familiar routines, familiar environments, familiar relationships, and familiar habits because familiarity feels psychologically safe. Even when situations make them unhappy, the brain still prefers predictability over uncertainty. Comfort feels safe. Growth feels dangerous. This is why people stay trapped for years inside lives they secretly want to escape. They stay in careers that drain them emotionally because change feels uncertain. They avoid difficult conversations because conflict feels uncomfortable. They delay goals because failure feels painful. They refuse opportunities because fear creates anxiety. They remain silent because judgment feels threatening. Over time, comfort slowly becomes psychological imprisonment. The comfort zone is dangerous because it rarely feels dangerous in the moment. It feels relaxing, familiar, and emotionally manageable. But while someone remains inside excessive comfort for too long, growth begins disappearing quietly. Confidence weakens, courage shrinks, ambition fades, emotional resilience declines, life becomes smaller, potential dies slowly inside comfort. The brain naturally resists discomfort because discomfort signals uncertainty. Uncertainty activates fear systems inside the nervous system. Whenever people attempt something unfamiliar, the brain immediately searches for possible danger. Public speaking creates fear. Taking risks creates anxiety. Starting something new creates emotional tension. Facing rejection creates discomfort. Even positive growth can feel psychologically threatening because growth requires entering unfamiliar territory. This is why many people sabotage themselves right before breakthroughs. The closer growth becomes, the louder fear often gets. The brain interprets unfamiliar situations as possible threats because it prioritizes survival over expansion. It would rather keep you emotionally safe than help you become stronger. This explains why motivation alone rarely creates transformation. The survival mind constantly pulls people back toward comfort because comfort feels predictable. But mentally strong people understand a powerful truth. Everything meaningful in life exists outside comfort zones. Confidence exists outside comfort. Growth exists outside comfort. Discipline exists outside comfort. Courage exists outside comfort. Transformation exists outside comfort. Nobody becomes mentally strong by remaining emotionally comfortable constantly. Strength is built through challenge. The nervous system adapts through exposure. This is one of the most important psychological principles behind courage and resilience. Every time someone voluntarily faces discomfort without escaping immediately, the brain slowly learns that discomfort is survivable. At first, fear feels overwhelming. Then exposure creates adaptation. Eventually, confidence begins replacing fear. This process happens gradually through repetition. Someone terrified of public speaking becomes calmer after repeated presentations. Someone afraid of social interaction becomes more confident through repeated conversations. Someone anxious about failure becomes stronger after surviving multiple setbacks. The nervous system learns through experience. This is why courage is not a personality trait people are born with. Courage is a trained psychological response developed through repeated exposure to discomfort. Every difficult situation faced without avoidance strengthens emotional resilience internally. Avoidance weakens people. Exposure strengthens them. Most people unintentionally train themselves to become mentally fragile because they constantly avoid discomfort. The moment anxiety appears, they escape. The moment fear appears, they stop. The moment uncertainty appears, they retreat back into familiarity. This teaches the brain, discomfort is dangerous. You cannot handle challenge. Avoidance keeps you safe. Over time, emotional sensitivity increases. Even small difficulties begin feeling overwhelming because the nervous system was never trained to tolerate pressure. This is why modern comfort often creates hidden weakness psychologically. People become emotionally dependent on convenience, certainty, distraction, and instant relief. They lose tolerance for boredom, stress, uncertainty, criticism, discomfort, and challenge. As resilience weakens, fear strengthens. Then life becomes controlled by emotional avoidance. Many people spend years waiting to feel ready before acting. But readiness rarely appears before movement. Readiness is usually created during the process itself. The brain gains confidence after exposure, not before it. This is why fearless people often act while still feeling uncertain. They understand that discomfort is temporary, but regret can last for years. Every meaningful transformation requires entering unfamiliar psychological territory. Starting a business feels uncomfortable. Building discipline feels uncomfortable. Having difficult conversations feels uncomfortable. Changing habits feels uncomfortable. Pursuing ambitious goals feels uncomfortable. Discomfort is not evidence that you are failing. Very often, discomfort is evidence that you are growing. Mentally strong people stop interpreting discomfort as danger automatically. Instead, they begin seeing challenge as training. Pressure becomes preparation. Difficulty becomes development. This mindset changes everything. Instead of asking, "How do I avoid discomfort?" they begin asking, "What kind of discomfort will make me stronger?" That question leads toward growth. There are two types of pain in life: the pain of discipline and the pain of regret. The pain of discipline is temporary. The pain of regret compounds quietly for years. Most people choose temporary comfort without realizing they are choosing long-term dissatisfaction at the same time. Avoiding discomfort today often creates deeper suffering later. Avoiding exercise creates physical weakness. Avoiding difficult conversations damages relationships. Avoiding risk limits opportunity. Avoiding fear destroys confidence. Short-term comfort creates long-term limitation. Mentally strong individuals become willing to experience temporary discomfort for future freedom. They train themselves to tolerate emotional resistance instead of obeying it automatically. This requires building a different relationship with fear and challenge. The goal is not becoming emotionless. The goal is becoming stronger than temporary discomfort. One powerful psychological shift happens when people stop asking, "How do I eliminate fear?" and begin asking, "How do I move despite fear?" That shift creates courage. Courage grows through repetition. Every difficult action taken despite emotional resistance strengthens identity internally. Small acts of discipline compound psychologically over time. Waking up early consistently, exercising despite low motivation, speaking despite anxiety, taking risks despite uncertainty, remaining calm during pressure. These behaviors slowly rewire self-image. Eventually, people stop seeing themselves as fragile. They begin viewing themselves as capable of handling challenge. Self-trust grows stronger because evidence accumulates repeatedly. Confidence is built through survived discomfort. This is why challenge is necessary for psychological growth. Muscles strengthen through resistance. Minds strengthen through pressure. Emotional resilience develops through repeated exposure to uncertainty and discomfort. Without challenge, people remain psychologically weak because their nervous system never develops adaptation. Life itself guarantees difficulty eventually. Pain, uncertainty, rejection, failure, criticism, and stress are unavoidable parts of the human experience. The question is not whether discomfort will appear. The question is whether someone has trained themselves to handle it effectively. People who constantly avoid challenge remain emotionally vulnerable when real adversity arrives. But people who voluntarily practice discomfort develop emotional durability. They become calmer under pressure, more resilient during setbacks, more confident facing uncertainty, more disciplined during difficulty. This creates psychological freedom. Eventually, discomfort stops feeling like an enemy. It becomes part of growth itself. Challenges no longer feel like threats to identity. They become opportunities for expansion. This is when transformation accelerates. Because the moment someone becomes comfortable with challenge, fear begins losing its control over their life. And that is where real mental strength begins. Chapter 6. Discipline is stronger than motivation. Most people spend their lives waiting to feel motivated. They believe motivation is the secret behind success, confidence, productivity, emotional control, and transformation. They wait for the perfect mood, the perfect emotional state, the perfect level of energy, or the perfect moment before taking action. But motivation is unreliable because emotions are unstable by nature. Some days motivation appears strongly. Other days it disappears completely. People who depend entirely on motivation eventually become controlled by their feelings, and feelings change constantly. This is why discipline is far more powerful than motivation. Motivation is emotional. Discipline is behavioral. Motivation says, "I'll do it when I feel ready." Discipline says, "I'll do it whether I feel ready or not." That difference changes everything psychologically. Motivation feels exciting in the beginning because emotional intensity creates temporary energy. People feel inspired after watching motivational videos, reading powerful books, or imagining future success. But emotional excitement fades quickly. Fear returns. Laziness returns. Stress returns. Discomfort returns. When motivation disappears, most people stop moving because they never built systems strong enough to continue during emotionally difficult moments. Discipline continues when emotions fail. This is why disciplined people often achieve far more than highly motivated people. They understand that long-term success is not built through temporary emotional highs. It is built through repeated actions performed consistently over time, especially when emotions resist those actions. Discipline creates emotional stability because structure reduces internal chaos. Most mentally weak people live reactively. They wake up and allow emotions to determine behavior daily. If they feel tired, they avoid effort. If they feel anxious, they procrastinate. If they feel unmotivated, they stop progressing. Their life becomes controlled by temporary emotional states. This creates instability psychologically. Emotionally reactive people constantly experience inconsistency because feelings change too quickly. One good day creates excitement. One bad day destroys momentum. Their nervous system remains unstable because there is no structure strong enough to guide behavior independently from emotion. Discipline interrupts this chaos. When routines become consistent, the brain stops needing constant emotional negotiation before action. Habits reduce decision fatigue. Structure creates predictability. Predictability calms the nervous system. Over time, disciplined routines create emotional balance because behavior stops depending entirely on fluctuating feelings. This is why routines reduce anxiety significantly. The human brain craves certainty. When life feels chaotic internally, structure creates psychological grounding. Waking up consistently, exercising regularly, working intentionally, sleeping properly, and following routines all reduce mental overwhelm because the brain begins trusting stability again. Discipline creates order internally. Most people underestimate how deeply habits shape identity. Every repeated action teaches the brain something about who you are. If someone repeatedly avoids discomfort, the brain learns weakness. If someone repeatedly follows through despite resistance, the brain learns resilience. Identity is built through repeated behavior. This is why small actions matter far more than people realize psychologically. Tiny habits repeated consistently create powerful identity shifts over time. A person who exercises daily begins seeing themselves differently. Someone who reads regularly develops intellectual confidence. Someone who consistently keeps promises to themselves develops self-trust. Self-respect is built through consistency. Many people secretly struggle with low confidence because they continuously break promises to themselves. They say they will wake up early, but they do not. They say they will exercise, but they avoid it. They say they will stop procrastinating, but they continue delaying action. Eventually, the brain stops trusting itself. This creates internal disappointment that weakens confidence gradually. People often believe confidence comes from external validation, but deep confidence usually comes from self-trust. And self-trust is built when actions consistently align with intentions. Every disciplined action becomes evidence. Evidence says, I can rely on myself. I do what I say I will do. I can handle discomfort. I can maintain consistency. That internal evidence creates psychological strength. Fear also weakens through repetition. This is one of the most important reasons discipline matters so deeply. The brain becomes calmer around situations it experiences repeatedly. What once felt overwhelming eventually becomes familiar. Familiarity reduces fear. Someone terrified of exercise eventually adapts through routine. Someone anxious about public speaking becomes calmer through repetition. Someone fearful of discomfort becomes more resilient through repeated exposure. Discipline trains the nervous system. Most people wait for fear to disappear before taking action, but fear often disappears because of repeated action. Consistency teaches the brain safety gradually. The nervous system adapts through exposure, not avoidance. This is why disciplined people often appear mentally strong. Their strength is not magic. Their nervous system has simply been trained through repeated challenge, repetition, and structure. Mental toughness is built through consistent discomfort. Every disciplined action strengthens emotional resilience slightly. Waking up early despite resistance, exercising despite low motivation, working despite distraction, remaining calm despite stress. These moments train the mind to stop obeying emotional impulses automatically. Discipline teaches delayed gratification. This ability separates mentally strong individuals from emotionally reactive people. Weak minds seek immediate comfort constantly. Strong minds prioritize long-term growth over temporary emotional relief. One chooses ease now and suffers later. The other accepts discomfort now and grows stronger later. This difference compounds over years. Modern life makes discipline more difficult because distraction and instant gratification exist everywhere. Social media, entertainment, constant stimulation, endless scrolling, and instant comfort weaken attention spans and emotional tolerance. The brain becomes addicted to quick dopamine instead of meaningful progress. This creates fragile minds. People lose the ability to focus deeply, tolerate boredom, remain patient, or stay disciplined during uncomfortable tasks. Emotional impulses become stronger than long-term goals. Discipline reverses this psychological weakness. Every moment of self-control strengthens mental endurance. Delaying gratification, maintaining focus, and following routines despite emotional resistance gradually rebuilds psychological resilience. This is why disciplined people often experience greater peace internally. Their life becomes less chaotic because structure replaces impulsiveness. They stop negotiating with emotions constantly. Behavior becomes intentional instead of reactive. Discipline also creates freedom, although most people misunderstand this completely. They assume discipline is restrictive, but lack of discipline creates far more suffering. Lack of discipline creates financial stress. Lack of discipline damages health. Lack of discipline weakens relationships. Lack of discipline destroys confidence. Lack of discipline increases anxiety. Discipline creates stability, and stability creates freedom. The strongest people are not those who always feel motivated. They are those who continue moving even during emotional resistance. They understand that feelings are temporary, but habits shape destiny. This mindset changes life entirely. Instead of asking, "How do I feel today?" disciplined people ask, "What needs to be done regardless of emotion?" That question creates power. One of the most important psychological shifts happens when someone stops viewing discipline as punishment and starts viewing it as self-respect. Discipline is not self-hatred. It is self-leadership. It is choosing behaviors that strengthen future identity instead of obeying temporary emotional comfort. Every disciplined action becomes a vote for the person you are becoming. Small actions compound quietly. Daily routines compound quietly. Consistency compounds quietly. Over time, discipline changes identity itself. The anxious person becomes calmer. The weak person becomes stronger. The inconsistent person becomes reliable. The fearful person becomes courageous. Not because motivation suddenly appeared forever, but because repeated disciplined behavior rewired the mind gradually. This process takes time, which is why many people quit too early. They expect immediate transformation, but discipline works like compound interest psychologically. Tiny actions repeated daily create enormous change eventually. One disciplined day may seem insignificant, but disciplined months reshape identity. Disciplined years transform lives. Eventually, discipline becomes automatic. The behaviors that once felt difficult begin feeling normal. Emotional resistance loses some of its power because the nervous system adapts to consistency. This is when real mental toughness develops, not when life becomes easy, not when fear disappears completely, but when action continues despite emotional discomfort. That is true discipline. And discipline will always be stronger than motivation because discipline does not depend on feelings to function. Chapter 7. Your environment programs your mind. Most people believe their thoughts, emotions, habits, and mindset are entirely personal. But the truth is that human psychology is deeply shaped by environment. The people you spend time with, the information you consume, the spaces you live in, the conversations you tolerate, and the energy surrounding your daily life all silently program your mind over time. Environment influences identity far more than most people realize. A weak environment slowly creates weak thinking. A fearful environment creates fearful behavior. A chaotic environment creates emotional instability. And because these influences happen gradually, many people never recognize how much their surroundings are shaping their mental state every single day. Human beings are psychologically absorbent. The mind constantly adapts to repeated exposure. Thoughts, emotional patterns, beliefs, habits, and behaviors spread socially through a process psychologists often describe as emotional contagion. Emotions are contagious because the brain naturally mirrors the emotional energy of people nearby. Spend enough time around anxious people, and anxiety begins feeling normal. Spend enough time around negativity, gossip, emotional drama, complaining, or fear, and those patterns slowly become internalized psychologically. This happens subconsciously. Most people do not intentionally choose negative mental conditioning. They absorb it through repeated exposure. A person surrounded by constant criticism slowly develops insecurity. Someone living around emotionally reactive individuals becomes more emotionally reactive themselves. Someone constantly exposed to pessimism begins expecting failure automatically. The nervous system adapts to repeated emotional environments. This is why toxic people can destroy mental health slowly, without obvious immediate damage. Toxic individuals drain emotional energy because they constantly reinforce stress, fear, insecurity, chaos, negativity, manipulation, judgment, or emotional instability. Some people create exhaustion simply through their presence because their mindset infects everyone around them psychologically. Negativity spreads easily. People who constantly complain train the brain to focus on problems. People addicted to drama normalize emotional chaos. People trapped in victim mindsets weaken resilience in others. People consumed by fear amplify fear socially. Over time, your environment becomes your psychological training ground. Many people want confidence while surrounding themselves with insecurity. They want peace while constantly consuming chaos. They want discipline while living inside distraction. They want growth while remaining around people committed to comfort and stagnation. This creates internal conflict. The mind struggles to grow in environments constantly reinforcing weakness. One of the biggest environmental threats in modern life is information overload. Human brains were never designed to process endless streams of stimulation all day. Social media, breaking news, notifications, endless content, comparison culture, and constant digital noise overwhelm the nervous system continuously. The brain rarely rests anymore. Most people wake up and immediately flood their minds with information before their nervous system even stabilizes. Fear-based headlines, negative opinions, comparison triggers, unrealistic lifestyles, arguments, distractions, and emotional stimulation bombard the mind constantly. This creates chronic anxiety psychologically. The nervous system becomes overstimulated because the brain interprets nonstop information as nonstop urgency. Attention spans weaken. Emotional stability declines. Focus disappears. Inner peace becomes difficult because mental noise never stops. Modern environments are often designed to capture attention, not protect mental health. Social media especially creates dangerous psychological conditioning. People constantly compare their lives, appearance, success, relationships, and progress against curated images from others. This comparison silently weakens confidence and increases insecurity. The brain begins feeling inadequate constantly because it is exposed to unrealistic standards daily. Comparison destroys gratitude. Comparison weakens identity. Comparison creates emotional exhaustion. The more someone consumes emotionally toxic input, the harder it becomes to maintain psychological clarity. This is why protecting mental energy becomes essential for mental strength. Mentally strong people become extremely intentional about what enters their mind. They understand that thoughts are shaped by repeated exposure. They do not consume negativity carelessly. They recognize that every environment either strengthens or weakens psychological resilience gradually. This requires boundaries. Not everyone deserves unlimited access to your energy. Not every conversation deserves your attention. Not every opinion deserves emotional investment. Not every piece of information deserves space in your mind. Boundaries protect emotional stability. Many people feel constantly drained because they absorb everyone else's emotions without filtering what they allow into their psychological environment. They listen endlessly to negativity, gossip, emotional chaos, fear, and drama until their own nervous system becomes overwhelmed too. Strong minds require intentional protection. This does not mean isolating yourself completely or avoiding reality. It means becoming conscious of environmental influence. It means asking, what kind of mindset is my environment training inside me daily? That question changes everything. Environments shape identity through repetition. The people around you influence what feels normal psychologically. If everyone around someone avoids risk, ambition begins shrinking too. If everyone complains constantly, gratitude weakens. If everyone seeks comfort endlessly, discipline becomes harder to maintain. Humans naturally adapt to group behavior. This is why ambitious, disciplined, emotionally strong individuals often choose environments carefully. They understand that growth-focused surroundings strengthen growth-focused thinking. Being around resilient people normalizes resilience. Being around disciplined people normalizes discipline. Being around calm individuals strengthens emotional stability. Identity is socially reinforced. This principle applies to physical spaces too. Chaotic environments often create chaotic thinking. Cluttered surroundings increase mental overwhelm subconsciously because the brain processes disorder constantly. Clean, intentional environments create greater psychological calm and focus. Your surroundings communicate emotional messages silently. A room filled with distraction weakens attention. An environment filled with stress increases tension. An environment filled with purpose strengthens focus. Designing a psychologically strong lifestyle means intentionally creating environments that support the person you want to become, instead of reinforcing the version you are trying to escape. This includes digital environments as well. The content you consume daily programs your mindset gradually. Fear-based content strengthens anxiety. Constant outrage strengthens emotional reactivity. Mindless entertainment weakens focus if consumed excessively. But educational content, growth-oriented conversations, disciplined influences, and inspiring environments strengthen psychological resilience over time. The brain becomes what it repeatedly consumes. This is why mentally strong people guard attention carefully. Attention is one of the most valuable psychological resources humans possess. Whatever consistently captures attention eventually shapes identity. Protecting mental energy also requires reducing unnecessary emotional stimulation. Many people unknowingly live in permanent psychological overload because silence feels uncomfortable. They constantly seek distraction through phones, music, social media, television, or endless stimulation. But overstimulation weakens self-awareness. When the mind never becomes quiet, people lose connection with themselves. They stop thinking deeply. Emotional clarity disappears. Internal chaos grows stronger because the nervous system never fully recovers. Strong minds require recovery periods. Silence matters. Stillness matters. Reflection matters. Rest matters. Without recovery, mental exhaustion becomes permanent. Building a growth-focused environment means intentionally surrounding yourself with things that strengthen clarity, courage, discipline, and emotional peace. This does not require perfection. It requires awareness and consistent adjustment. Choose conversations that strengthen growth. Choose relationships that support emotional stability. Choose routines that reduce chaos. Choose content that strengthens the mind. Choose environments that encourage focus and calmness. These decisions compound psychologically over time. Eventually, your environment begins supporting your transformation instead of sabotaging it. Discipline becomes easier because distractions decrease. Emotional peace increases because chaos reduces. Confidence strengthens because negativity weakens. The goal is not controlling every external factor perfectly. That is impossible. The goal is becoming intentional instead of unconscious about environmental influence. Because whether you realize it or not, your environment is always programming your mind. The question is, what kind of person is it training you to become? Chapter 8. Mentally strong people think long-term. One of the biggest differences between mentally weak people and mentally strong people is the way they think about time. Weak thinking is emotional and short-term. Strong thinking is strategic and long-term. Most people allow temporary emotions to control permanent decisions. They seek immediate comfort, immediate pleasure, immediate relief, and immediate validation without realizing these short-term choices are slowly shaping their future. Mentally strong people think differently. They understand that life is built through accumulated decisions repeated consistently over time. They are willing to sacrifice temporary comfort for long-term freedom, growth, peace, and success. Emotional thinking focuses only on the present moment. It asks, what feels good right now? What helps me escape discomfort immediately? How can I avoid pain today? Strategic thinking asks a completely different question. What will this decision create over the next 5 years? That question changes everything psychologically. Most destructive behaviors provide short-term emotional relief while creating long-term suffering. Procrastination feels comfortable temporarily but creates stress later. Avoiding difficult conversations feels easier now but damages relationships later. Overspending creates instant pleasure but financial anxiety later. Avoiding discipline feels relaxing today but creates weakness tomorrow. Short-term comfort often creates long-term pain. The human brain naturally seeks immediate rewards because survival wiring prioritizes instant gratification. Ancient humans benefited from immediate access to food, safety, and pleasure because survival was uncertain. But modern life has turned this instinct into one of the greatest obstacles to personal growth. Endless entertainment, social media, instant dopamine, Emotional distractions and comfort are available constantly. People become addicted to immediate emotional relief without realizing they are weakening their future simultaneously. This is why delayed gratification is such a powerful psychological skill. Delayed gratification means tolerating temporary discomfort for future rewards. It means choosing discipline over impulse, choosing growth over convenience, choosing patience over emotional urgency. Mentally strong people understand this deeply. They realize that almost every meaningful achievement requires temporary sacrifice. Physical health requires discipline before results appear. Financial success requires patience before freedom arrives. Confidence requires discomfort before courage develops. Emotional stability requires consistency before peace strengthens. The greatest rewards in life usually arrive slowly. Weak minds struggle with this because emotional thinking constantly demands immediate certainty and immediate results. People start exercising for 1 week and quit because transformation is not instant. They begin building discipline but stop when motivation fades. They pursue goals briefly before emotional discomfort convinces them to give up. Emotionally reactive people often abandon long-term progress for short-term relief. But mentally strong individuals understand that patience is power. Patience is not passive weakness. Patience is emotional endurance. It is the ability to remain committed despite delayed rewards, uncertainty, setbacks, and temporary discomfort. Most people fail not because they lack intelligence or talent, but because they lack the emotional endurance required to continue long enough. Everything compounds over time. Daily choices compound. Habits compound. Thought patterns compound. Discipline compounds. Fear compounds. Confidence compounds. This is one of the most important psychological truths in life. Small decisions repeated consistently create massive outcomes eventually. One unhealthy habit may seem harmless temporarily. One missed workout seems insignificant. One day of procrastination feels small, but repeated patterns shape identity and future reality gradually. The same principle works positively too. One disciplined action strengthens self-respect. One courageous decision builds confidence. One difficult conversation improves emotional resilience. One focused hour creates momentum. Mentally strong people think in terms of accumulation instead of immediate emotion. They understand that tiny actions repeated daily eventually become life-changing transformations. This mindset creates enormous psychological advantage because emotionally reactive people often focus only on immediate feelings. If something feels difficult now, they assume it is wrong. If progress is slow, they assume failure. If discomfort appears, they retreat. But growth often feels uncomfortable long before it feels rewarding. This is why long-term thinking requires emotional control. You must learn how to act independently from temporary feelings. Otherwise, emotions will constantly pull you towards short-term comfort and away from meaningful growth. Strategic thinkers become less controlled by emotional urgency. They stop needing instant validation. They stop expecting immediate success. They stop quitting because results are delayed. Instead, they trust the process of consistent action over time. This creates resilience psychologically. Resilience is not just surviving difficulty. It is maintaining direction despite emotional discomfort and delayed rewards. Mentally strong individuals understand that setbacks are temporary while long-term vision matters more. When failures happen, they do not emotionally collapse immediately because they think beyond the current moment. They recognize that one setback does not define the entire future. One difficult season does not erase long-term progress. Long-term thinkers remain calmer during adversity because perspective protects emotional stability. Emotionally reactive people magnify temporary problems into permanent catastrophes. Strategic thinkers zoom out psychologically. They ask, how important will this situation be in 5 years? What can this teach me long term? How can this challenge strengthen me? Perspective reduces emotional chaos. This ability becomes especially powerful during difficult periods of life. Challenges become easier to survive when viewed as temporary chapters instead of permanent endings. Mentally strong people train themselves to think beyond immediate emotional pain. This creates emotional endurance. Emotional endurance is the ability to continue functioning, growing, and moving forward despite discomfort, uncertainty, stress, or delayed gratification. Without emotional endurance, people quit too early. They seek relief instead of growth. But growth requires staying present through uncomfortable phases. Every successful person develops tolerance for delayed rewards eventually. Athletes tolerate years of training before mastery. Entrepreneurs tolerate uncertainty before success. Emotionally disciplined individuals tolerate discomfort before transformation. The weak mind says, "This is too hard." The strong mind says, "This is part of the process." That difference changes destiny. Fear also weakens when people think long-term. Fear usually focuses attention narrowly on immediate discomfort. The brain exaggerates present pain while ignoring future consequences. Someone avoids public speaking because current anxiety feels overwhelming, but they ignore the long-term confidence and opportunities that courage could create. Long-term thinking breaks fear's control. When people focus only on immediate emotion, fear wins easily. But when they begin considering future outcomes seriously, short-term discomfort loses some power. This is why fearless decision-making requires strategic thinking. Fearless people are not people without fear. They simply value long-term freedom more than temporary emotional comfort. They understand that avoiding fear today often creates deeper suffering tomorrow. Avoiding difficult conversations damages future relationships. Avoiding discipline weakens future identity. Avoiding risks limits future opportunities. Avoiding discomfort creates future regret. Long-term thinkers understand this clearly. One of the most powerful habits mentally strong people develop is asking, "Will my future self thank me for this decision?" That question interrupts impulsive behavior immediately. Future-oriented thinking creates maturity psychologically because it strengthens responsibility and self-leadership. People stop acting only according to present emotion and begin acting according to long-term values, goals, and identity. This is how strong identities are built. Every disciplined choice becomes a vote for future strength. Every courageous action strengthens future confidence. Every patient decision compounds into future freedom. The beautiful thing about long-term thinking is that life eventually rewards consistency. Most people underestimate what can change in 5 years of disciplined action because they are obsessed with what can happen in 5 days. Transformation rarely happens instantly. It happens gradually, then suddenly. This is why mentally strong people stay focused even when progress feels invisible temporarily. They understand that internal growth often happens long before external results appear. Roots grow before trees become visible. Eventually, discipline compounds into confidence. Patience compounds into success. Calmness compounds into wisdom. Courage compounds into freedom. And those who once seemed naturally strong are usually simply people who learned how to keep thinking long-term while everyone else became controlled by temporary emotions. That is the true power of strategic thinking. It allows you to sacrifice what feels good now for the life you truly want later. Chapter 9. Pressure Reveals Your True Mindset. Anyone can appear calm when life feels easy. Anyone can seem confident when nothing is at risk. Anyone can talk about discipline, emotional control, and mental strength during comfortable moments. But pressure changes everything. Pressure exposes emotional weaknesses, hidden fears, insecurities, habits, and psychological patterns that remain invisible during calm situations. When stress increases, the real mindset underneath the surface begins to reveal itself clearly. Pressure does not create character. Pressure reveals it. Most people lose control under pressure because their nervous system becomes overwhelmed by uncertainty and emotional intensity. When challenges appear, the brain immediately shifts into survival mode. Heart rate increases, muscles tighten, breathing becomes shallow, thoughts speed up, fear intensifies. Rational thinking weakens while emotional reactions become stronger. This is the ancient survival system activating again. The human brain was designed to respond quickly during dangerous situations. Thousands of years ago, fast emotional reactions helped humans survive physical threats. But modern pressure is usually psychological instead of physical. Public speaking, interviews, deadlines, uncertainty, financial stress, social judgment, competition, failure, and difficult conversations all trigger the same nervous system responses even when no real physical danger exists. The brain treats emotional stress like survival danger. This is why pressure feels so intense psychologically. Under pressure, weak thinking patterns become magnified. Someone already controlled by fear becomes more fearful. Someone emotionally reactive becomes more impulsive. Someone lacking discipline becomes more chaotic. Pressure amplifies existing mental habits. This is why mentally strong people train themselves before difficult moments arrive. Real composure is not created during pressure. It is prepared before pressure appears. Most people try to develop emotional control only after stress overwhelms them. But mental resilience works like physical fitness. It must be trained consistently before challenges arrive. Pressure simply tests what has already been built internally. Fear becomes especially powerful during uncertainty because the brain desperately wants control. Uncertainty creates psychological discomfort because the mind cannot fully predict outcomes. The brain begins imagining worst-case scenarios automatically. Thoughts race toward failure, embarrassment, rejection, or disaster. What if I fail? What if I freeze? What if everything goes wrong? What if people judge me? These thoughts intensify emotional pressure because the nervous system reacts to imagined danger as if it were real. Most people under pressure become trapped inside future-focused fear instead of remaining connected to the present moment. This weakens performance immediately. Fear narrows attention. Strategic thinking disappears because emotional survival systems dominate mental energy. People panic during presentations. They overreact during conflict. They make impulsive decisions during stress. They lose focus during pressure because emotional intensity hijacks rational thought. This is why nervous system regulation becomes essential. Mentally strong people understand that controlling the body helps control the mind. The nervous system cannot remain highly activated if breathing slows down intentionally. Calm breathing signals safety to the brain. One of the most powerful techniques for reducing pressure is controlled breathing. When stress rises, breathing usually becomes fast, shallow, and unstable automatically. This strengthens anxiety because the body interprets shallow breathing as evidence of danger. But slow breathing reverses this process. Deep, controlled breaths activate the parasympathetic nervous system, which helps calm the body and restore mental clarity. Even a few slow breaths can reduce emotional intensity significantly. Breathing becomes a psychological anchor. This is why elite performers, athletes, military personnel, and emotionally disciplined individuals use breathing techniques constantly during high-pressure situations. They understand that emotional control begins physically before it becomes mental. Grounding techniques also help regulate pressure effectively. Grounding means reconnecting attention to the present moment instead of becoming trapped inside imagined future scenarios. Pressure usually becomes overwhelming because the mind catastrophizes endlessly. The brain imagines failure before failure happens. It imagines humiliation before humiliation exists. It creates emotional suffering through anticipation. Grounding interrupts this spiral. Focusing on physical sensations, breathing patterns, immediate surroundings, or simple present moment tasks calms the nervous system because attention returns to reality instead of imagined danger. Strong minds stay present under pressure. Weak minds become consumed by catastrophic thinking. Strategic thinking becomes extremely important during stressful situations because pressure often pushes people toward emotional impulsiveness. The emotionally reactive mind wants immediate escape. It wants comfort, certainty, relief, or avoidance. But strategic thinkers remain solution-focused even while feeling pressure internally. This does not mean they feel no fear. It means fear does not completely control their thinking. Mentally strong individuals train themselves to ask better questions during difficult moments. Instead of, "What if everything goes wrong?" they ask, "What is the next best step right now?" Instead of, "How do I escape this discomfort?" they ask, "How do I handle this situation effectively?" These questions redirect attention toward action and control instead of helplessness. Pressure becomes more manageable when broken into smaller moments. Most people become overwhelmed because they mentally carry the entire future simultaneously. They think about all possible outcomes, consequences, and dangers at once. Strategic thinkers narrow focus intentionally. They focus on the next action, the next breath, the next decision, the next step. This creates psychological stability during chaos. Pressure can also become a powerful source of growth when viewed differently. Most people interpret pressure as evidence they are failing or incapable. But pressure often appears precisely because growth is happening. Pressure reveals weaknesses that need strengthening. Pressure exposes emotional habits requiring discipline. Pressure tests resilience. Pressure develops endurance. Without pressure, mental toughness never fully develops. Just as muscles strengthen through resistance, psychological resilience strengthens through challenge. Every difficult situation handled calmly becomes training for future pressure. Every stressful moment survived builds evidence that discomfort is manageable. This is how resilience develops. Resilience is not the absence of struggle. It is the ability to continue functioning effectively despite stress, uncertainty, fear, and emotional discomfort. Resilient people are not emotionally invincible. They simply recover faster and maintain direction more effectively under pressure. Recovery matters greatly because chronic stress destroys emotional balance over time. The nervous system cannot remain in survival mode constantly without consequences. Sleep weakens. Anxiety increases. Emotional reactions intensify. Focus declines. This is why mentally strong people prioritize recovery intentionally. Rest is not weakness. Recovery is psychological maintenance. Strong minds require moments of calm, reflection, stillness, exercise, sleep, and emotional reset. Without recovery, pressure accumulates until burnout appears. One of the most important mindset shifts happens when people stop seeing pressure as an enemy and begin viewing it as training. Challenges stop becoming evidence of weakness and start becoming opportunities for development. Pressure builds self-trust. Every difficult moment handled with composure strengthens internal confidence. Every stressful situation survived teaches the brain, "I can handle this. I can remain calm. I can think clearly under pressure." That evidence becomes psychological strength. Eventually, people stop fearing pressure as intensely because they trust their ability to respond effectively. Self-trust replaces panic gradually. This is why composure is so powerful psychologically. Calmness under pressure communicates internal stability. People naturally trust calm individuals because calmness signals control. The person who remains composed while others panic often becomes the emotional leader automatically. Composure does not mean emotionless behavior. It means controlled behavior despite emotion. That difference matters enormously. Mentally strong people still feel nervous before important moments. They still experience fear during uncertainty. They still feel stress during challenge, but they train themselves not to collapse emotionally under pressure. This is what separates emotional strength from emotional fragility. Pressure eventually reveals whether someone has trained their mind or simply avoided discomfort their entire life. Because when life becomes difficult, people do not rise to the level of their intentions. They fall to the level of their training. Chapter 10. Becoming mentally unstoppable. Most people spend their entire lives fighting temporary battles without ever changing the deeper identity controlling those battles underneath. They try to force motivation when they feel lazy. They attempt confidence when fear appears. They search for discipline while still identifying themselves as weak, inconsistent, anxious, or emotionally unstable. But lasting transformation never happens only at the level of behavior. Real transformation happens when identity changes. The moment someone changes the way they see themselves internally, everything else begins changing naturally. Becoming mentally unstoppable is not about becoming perfect. It is about becoming the kind of person who continues moving forward regardless of fear, discomfort, setbacks, or emotional resistance. Identity is the foundation of behavior. People consistently act according to who they believe they are. Someone who identifies as weak unconsciously behaves weakly. Someone who believes they are incapable avoids challenge automatically. Someone who sees themselves as disciplined begins behaving differently even during difficult moments. This is why repeated thoughts and actions matter so much psychologically. The brain constantly gathers evidence about identity through repetition. Every action sends a message to the subconscious mind. Every habit teaches the brain what kind of person you are becoming. If someone repeatedly avoids discomfort, the brain strengthens an identity built around fear and avoidance. But if someone repeatedly faces challenge despite emotional resistance, the brain slowly rewires toward courage and resilience. Identity changes through repeated evidence. This process is gradual, which is why many people quit too early. They expect instant transformation while their nervous system is still operating from old conditioning. But the brain adapts through repetition. Repeated courage rewires fear. Repeated discipline rewires impulsiveness. Repeated calmness rewires emotional chaos. Eventually, the new identity becomes stronger than the old one. This is how mentally unstoppable people are created. They are not born psychologically superior. They train themselves differently. One of the most powerful mental shifts a person can develop is anti-fragile thinking. Most people are psychologically fragile. Stress weakens them. Failure destroys confidence. Criticism breaks emotional stability. Challenges create collapse. Fragile minds avoid pressure because pressure exposes weakness. But anti-fragile minds grow stronger through difficulty. This concept changes everything psychologically. Instead of seeing hardship as proof that life is unfair or impossible, mentally unstoppable individuals begin viewing challenge as training. Pressure becomes development. Failure becomes feedback. Pain becomes preparation. Difficult experiences stop becoming enemies and start becoming fuel for growth. This mindset creates enormous resilience because adversity no longer destroys identity. Setbacks become temporary lessons instead of permanent emotional defeats. Someone with anti-fragile thinking asks, "How can this strengthen me?" instead of, "Why is this happening to me?" That difference creates psychological power. Life becomes far less frightening when every challenge becomes an opportunity for development, rather than evidence of inadequacy. Self-trust is another critical foundation of becoming mentally unstoppable. Most people struggle internally because they do not fully trust themselves. They doubt their ability to handle discomfort, uncertainty, failure, rejection, stress, or emotional pain. As a result, fear controls decision-making constantly, but self-trust changes the relationship with fear completely. When you trust yourself, Uncertainty becomes less terrifying because you believe in your ability to adapt. You stop needing perfect conditions before taking action. You stop requiring guarantees before movement. Self-trust is built through kept promises. Every time you follow through despite emotional resistance, self-trust strengthens slightly. Every difficult situation survived builds internal evidence. Every disciplined action proves capability. Over time, the brain begins recognizing, I can handle hard things. I can recover from setbacks. I can function under pressure. I can trust myself. That internal confidence becomes unshakable because it is built from evidence rather than temporary emotion. Internal confidence is very different from external confidence. External confidence depends on validation, praise, appearance, status, or success. It disappears easily when circumstances change. Internal confidence comes from knowing who you are, regardless of external outcomes. This type of confidence creates emotional freedom. Mentally unstoppable people do not need constant approval because their identity is internally grounded. They understand that criticism, rejection, temporary failure, and setbacks do not define their worth. Fearless decision-making becomes possible once emotional dependence weakens. Most people make decisions emotionally instead of strategically. Fear controls choices constantly. They avoid opportunities because of anxiety. They remain trapped because of comfort. They stay silent because of judgment. Their life becomes organized around emotional safety instead of meaningful growth. But mentally unstoppable individuals stop asking, what feels safest, and begin asking, what aligns with the person I want to become? This shift creates courage. Fearless decision-making does not mean fear disappears. Fear still exists because uncertainty is part of life. But emotionally strong people stop giving fear complete authority over behavior. They move despite fear. They act despite uncertainty. They continue despite discomfort. This is real courage. The brain slowly adapts to this new identity. Fear loses intensity because repeated action teaches the nervous system that discomfort is survivable. Over time, emotional resistance stops feeling like an emergency. This creates emotional mastery. Emotional mastery is not emotional suppression. It is the ability to experience emotions without becoming controlled by them. Mentally unstoppable individuals still feel stress, fear, sadness, frustration, and anxiety like everyone else. But they stop allowing temporary emotional states to dictate permanent decisions. This creates inner peace. Inner peace is not the absence of challenge. It is the absence of internal chaos during challenge. It is the ability to remain grounded even while life feels uncertain externally. Most people search for peace by trying to control the outside world completely. They believe peace will arrive once everything becomes predictable, safe, and comfortable. But life will always contain uncertainty. Real peace comes from becoming psychologically stronger than uncertainty itself. Mentally unstoppable people develop this stability internally. Their peace no longer depends entirely on external conditions because emotional resilience becomes stronger than temporary circumstances. Living with purpose instead of fear also changes everything psychologically. Fear-focused living creates survival mode existence. People focus only on avoiding pain, avoiding judgment, avoiding discomfort, and avoiding failure. Their life becomes smaller because fear constantly limits action. Purpose creates expansion. When someone becomes deeply connected to meaning, growth, contribution, values, or long-term vision, fear loses some control. Purpose gives suffering direction. Difficulty becomes easier to tolerate when connected to something meaningful. This is why people with strong purpose often display extraordinary resilience. They are not emotionally fearless. They simply value their mission more than temporary discomfort. Purpose creates endurance. Mentally unstoppable people stop organizing life around emotional comfort and start organizing life around meaning. They ask, What kind of life do I truly want to build? What kind of person do I want to become? What values do I want guiding my decisions? These questions create psychological direction. Eventually, a new mental operating system begins forming. Old patterns weaken while new patterns strengthen. The fearful identity slowly disappears because repeated action creates new conditioning internally. This new operating system is built on awareness instead of impulsiveness, discipline instead of emotional chaos, purpose instead of fear, resilience instead of avoidance, calmness instead of panic, growth instead of comfort. Transformation does not happen overnight. The brain rewires gradually through repetition, consistency, and emotional training. But every disciplined action strengthens the new identity further. One courageous decision matters. One calm response matters. One difficult action matters. One disciplined habit matters. Because small actions repeated consistently eventually create unstoppable minds. And once someone truly becomes mentally unstoppable, life no longer controls them through fear the same way it controls most people. They become stronger than the emotional patterns that once kept them trapped. That is where true freedom begins. Conclusion: your mind can become your greatest power. Most people go through life without ever truly understanding the invisible forces controlling them. They believe their struggles are caused entirely by external circumstances, but in reality, much of human suffering begins internally. Fear controls decisions. Emotional reactions shape behavior. Overthinking destroys peace. Negative thought patterns weaken confidence. Unconscious habits silently shape identity. And because these patterns repeat daily, most people never realize how deeply their own mind is influencing the direction of their life. But awareness changes everything. The moment you begin observing your thoughts instead of automatically obeying them, you begin taking back control. The moment you recognize emotional reactions before they control your behavior, psychological freedom begins. Awareness creates separation between who you truly are and the temporary emotions, fears, and mental patterns that once controlled you unconsciously. Fear and emotional discomfort will always remain part of being human. Even the strongest people still experience uncertainty, anxiety, pressure, rejection, self-doubt, and emotional pain. Mental strength does not mean becoming emotionless. It means becoming stronger than the emotions that once controlled your actions. That is the real goal. Courage is not the absence of fear. Discipline is not the absence of resistance. Confidence is not the absence of insecurity. True mental strength is continuing to move forward despite those things. This transformation happens through small daily actions repeated consistently over time. One calm response during stress matters. One disciplined decision matters. One courageous action matters. One difficult conversation matters. One moment of self-control matters. These small actions may seem insignificant individually, but repeated behaviors slowly reshape identity. The mind changes through repetition. Every time you choose discipline over comfort, you strengthen resilience. Every time you act despite fear, you weaken fear's control. Every time you remain calm during pressure, you build emotional stability. Every time you stop overthinking and take action, you strengthen self-trust. Over time, these moments compound. Discipline compounds into confidence. Courage compounds into freedom. Calmness compounds into power. Consistency compounds into transformation. Eventually, you stop becoming controlled by temporary emotions so easily. External chaos loses some of its power over your internal state. Pressure stops feeling overwhelming because resilience becomes stronger. Fear stops controlling every decision because self-trust grows deeper. And in a world filled with distraction, emotional chaos, impulsiveness, and fear, calmness becomes a superpower. The people who master themselves become different from the crowd. They think clearly while others panic. They stay disciplined while others quit. They remain grounded while others become emotionally reactive. They continue moving while others remain trapped by fear. This is why your mind can become either your greatest prison or your greatest power. The choice begins with what you repeatedly think, tolerate, practice, and reinforce every single day. Your future is not created in one dramatic moment. It is created through daily mental habits. So stop waiting for fear to disappear completely. Stop waiting to feel perfectly ready. Stop waiting for confidence before action. Start now. Train your mind. Control your emotions. Build discipline. Face discomfort. Think long-term. Protect your peace. And become the kind of person fear can no longer control. Because the strongest transformation in life is not changing your circumstances first. It is changing the mind that experiences those circumstances.